would you mind talking about the documentary for a little bit? Like, how did it come about and why did you feel so committed to bring it to life?
We would say the seeds were planted to make a film from this story back in 2014 when Chol Soo Lee died. And I attended the funeral and actually to write an obituary for Korean American Magazine, where I was working at the time, and also to see how my journalism mentor was doing. K.W. Lee, the journalist in the film, whose series of stories helped trigger the movement to free Chol Soo Lee, he was in terrible grief because he had never expected to outlive Chol Soo Lee, somebody he had worked so hard to, whose life he worked so hard to help save. So while I was at the funeral, I was just struck by the emotion in the room, which felt like it was beyond grief and people mourning someone they had lost. There was like this overwhelming heaviness. And at one point, KW stood up and he was very emotional and he questioned, why is this story underground after all these years? And this was a landmark Pan-Asian American social justice movement, and yet it had been forgotten. And was not even taught in American universities and colleges under Asian American studies. And KW was lamenting that because I think he knew this was such an important and singular story that could actually have tremendous impact even today. So fast forward about 9-10 months later, and Eugene and I, who had worked together previously as journalists, and had always shared a passion sort of for complicated Asian American stories and telling them with nuance and depth, we were brainstorming about making a film together. And so I spoke about this heaviness and how important this story was. And he and I just decided we would dive in, we would excavate this history, and that it was just too important to allow to stay buried. It just felt like even our generational responsibility.
A lot of the work that Julia and I had done was at Korean Journal, the Korean American magazine based in Los Angeles, that Julia was referencing. And I also work as a video editor. So at the time I was actually working at the New York Times in their video department. But I was really missing the kinds of stories that Julia and I would work on. So it kind of seemed like perfect timing at that point to really just dive into this incredible story that Julia had mentioned, and we both have known KW for quite some time, of course. So there's a personal connection there as well to this story.
What challenges did you guys face, and how did you overcome some of the roadblocks? And I guess the third part, were there any surprises?
I think there were many challenges.
Yes.
It took us 6 years actually to make this film. So we had a lot to overcome. I think for me personally, it's just never working on a film, period. I come from a print journalism background. And so there was actually a new language to learn, language of cinema. And so that was challenging. But I would say, like, for both of us, one major challenge was that we never had a chance to interview Chol Soo Lee ourselves. Because the film's origin story came about after his death. So I think as much as we always tried to immerse ourselves in like everything he left behind in his interviews and his writings, his memoir, the intimate phone conversations he had with K.W. Lee that are featured in the film, we still felt like maybe we weren't getting close enough, to the truth. And then, quite magically, after our narrator, Sebastian Yoon, joined our project, it actually felt like so much fell into place. And Sebastian, his background is he's actually formerly incarcerated Korean American, and was actually featured in another documentary series called College Behind Bars. And he's the discovery of our producer, Soo Kim, who saw him speaking and just had this gut instinct that he could actually voice Chol Soo Lee, and thought that there was something in him that reminded her of him. And actually Sebastian, he just joined our project in 2021. But as soon as he came on, he said he could personally identify with Chol Soo Lee's story. He really wanted to work hard, he said, and even he even revisited his own trauma of incarceration, because it was just released in 2019. But he was willing to do this and work with us because he really wanted audiences, when they watch this film, to really try to understand Chol Soo Lee and his struggles, and how hard it was for him to overcome them, including the dehumanization that you experience in prison, that kind of long-term incarceration, and the demons that actually follow you even long after your release.
It's kind of amazing how the stars align.
Absolutely. Yeah. KWE
Yeah.
often talks about telepathy, actually. And sometimes I would say, like, telepathy, what are you talking about? But he would say telepathy, especially he said, among oppressed people or people who are voiceless in society. But having this telepathy with each other and being able to work together and communicate that way. And now I believe it, now I believe it.
Why do you think it's important for particularly audiences in St. Louis to see your documentary?
The films echo some of the things that were said about Michael Brown, during the period of time when Ferguson was in the news. And so in there is this connection that I think, as Julia was saying, that oppressed people, voiceless people have with each other, that often maybe doesn't get talked about a lot. Asian Americans are not often part of these conversations about criminal justice reform. And so our film exists as a bit of a provocation, we feel, to really get Asian Americans involved in these conversations, as part of these conversations, and to seek out common cause with other communities in ways that can be constructive for society. And I think particularly in St. Louis, in Ferguson, which was the epicenter of so much of what has led to today, there's just a deep connection with our film and our story.
And, I think they're just universal themes in our film, and it's resonating, especially now with Asian Americans because of this disturbing spike in anti-Asian violence. That's what we find when we shared the film. It's touching them in such profound ways right now. In a way, this film, I think, is arming them with a sense of history, and connecting the dots between what's happening now to Asian Americans and the racism we've experienced actually long throughout our history that just people don't know about and people didn't acknowledge before. But we could also be inspired by this movement of resistance led by Asian Americans. This crazy alliance of like these first generation Korean immigrants, including church-going grandmothers, standing alongside third generation Asian American radicals. That's quite an unusual scene and something we're not used to seeing, but it happened, and this is the truth. And we should maybe take that kind of inspiration from it, that we can overcome incredible odds, and do the seemingly impossible, and right wrongs. So we hope that audiences actually will also take this film and see it as a source of inspiration.
What can we do just as a community, as an audience member, as a journalist? What are ways that we can help support the work that you do?
We so appreciate just you presenting us with this opportunity to share the film there, because it is so important to get this story beyond the coasts and to communities that might be overlooked, Asian American and non-Asian American communities. We're currently screening or streaming on Mubi, M-U-B-I. That's the streamer that we're on currently. So we're available right now. And come next year, we're going to be on PBS, on Independent Lens as well. So the film will be broadly accessible across the country. Yeah, no, we're so excited about that. And they've been incredible in terms of supporting our film, in terms of supporting outreach efforts as well, to have community conversations across the country in as many places as we can. As well as the fact that PBS, I think, was an important goal for us because PBS is broadcast in prisons as well. And so to reach incarcerated population is always really important to us as a goal. So please spread the word that our film is available and will be broadly available in another platform. And yeah, come watch, come take part in our conversation, find us on social and give us a holler.